and welcome to our Think About It session. Tinie, welcome back. You've been
Thank
missing.
you. Yes, it was down in sunny South Africa.
Oh.
I onboarded and offboarded a plane.
We held the fort here, don't worry. Someone has to do it, right? While you're off
I know.
enjoying yourself.
Listen, yeah, I thought I'd just bring that in as we're talking about onboarding and offboarding a business. So.
We are. It wasn't lost on me, Tinie.
Okay,
so welcome along to anyone that's listening to our empowered leadership conversations that we have every Thursday lunchtime. We come and we share a really small snippet to help you to be a more collaborative, inclusive, impactful leader in the workplace. So today we are talking about the crucial role of onboarding and offboarding. Now, I will say we recognise that this is a huge topic that we work really closely with organisations on, but we want to just bring a real snippet of what these topics are and how you can be aware, become curious and improve yours if needed. So, Tinie, the crucial role of onboarding and offboarding. Hit me up.
So I gave it a bit of thought. Onboarding starts even in the recruitment process. And what it is you're looking for, but also not just based on the roles and responsibilities someone's going to come and fill for you, but it's who they are and what it is that they bring to your business that'll enhance the culture, the team, the orientation. What is the value that they bring? And that's where the onboarding starts. I mean, there are three critical things from an onboarding point of view: the clear communication of roles and expectations, integration into the company culture and its processes, and then also the effective resource allocation and support that we're given to them. And I'd like to just add a fourth element, and it's what we're expecting you to bring to our business. We want you to become a little bit edgy around the sales process, or we want you to be a little bit more crisper around our whole onboarding process if you're in learning and development, or give a specific transformational piece to the new incumbent into your organization to get them excited about applying their own specialist skill and for them to be able to make a mark for the other people that are in the business already.
They really, for interesting points, and I think we've gone straight into that level of detail. And I think for people listening, why should we even be talking about this? Why is this an organizational development, coaching, culture conversation, right? Because surely it's a process, right? It's a process that we take people through. But from what we say and listening to those points, the point is, if we don't start these conversations at recruitment stage, setting expectations at the interview stage and the very start, this will have a detrimental impact further down the line, right? So we're not just talking about this because we want you to have great, slick, automated processes, are we?
No. And recruitment has changed. It's no longer desperation looking for a job or desperation looking for an individual. People are selling a craft, and we're buying a particular craft from someone. And that's the discussion that we need to have. And so I'm looking for a particular piece of work, and I see that you bring this from a behavioral point of view. I sometimes, and this may sound controversial, because people leave managers and not the business, I feel the strongest emphasis in the recruitment process and on the onboarding piece is the person's behavioral attributes and the value that they'll bring to the team dynamics and the honesty and trust and truthfulness of the conversation that they'll be having related to your culture and your environment that you're working in. And aligning that first, the skill and craft can come and be taught. Obviously, you've got to measure whether they are saying they're a master and they're actually just an intermediate. So those are different discussions to have. But the focus, 80% of the focus, should be on the behavioral integration of the individual and how you, as the manager, will be able to work with them, how they will be interacting with the team. So many times we've seen people, and I'm going to give you an example, where they come in, they're a master in their craft, but they can't work with people. Annoy everybody around them. They might be delivering great work, but the whole team dynamic has changed. People don't want to they're not trusting anymore. Everyone's moaning in the background, a lot of gossip going on. The whole dynamic changes and performance decreases. So as much as what you thought, oh, I'm bringing in a specialist in this and they're a PhD in engineering and they're going to cover all of this stuff, them annoying people around you, that's the first thing you need to interview for, is how are you working with teams? How have you helped someone else in the past? Who have you empowered recently? And give me the case study. Tell me what it looked like. Those things are things that need to be discussed right in the recruitment stages and when they come into your door, and telling them about your culture. And if your culture is an authoritarian culture, tell them.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to last if they're not authoritarian orientated.
And I think it's like, let's go, this has changed, so I think, rapidly in the last couple of years, around, we almost want to get the right person in the right role, that we start out with this ideal person that we're creating when we go to recruitment, right? It's like they've got this qualification, they've got this experience, they do this, they do this, they do this. And we assume that if we tick all of these boxes, we're going to get this perfect person who's going to come and make our lives easier. Whereas actually there's a big piece missing of, actually, what could we teach the person who's the ideal fit for our culture, perfect attitude, behaviors, they fit into the business? Actually, what's non-negotiable that they're going to have to bring is this, this, and this. But everything else can be learned or taught if they've got the right attitude and culture, right? Exactly. And I've seen a massive change in how people recruit, to the point where people don't want CVs anymore. People want to have a talk with the person. It's like, starts off with like, tell me about yourself. What are you interested in? Like, tell me your experience. And I know there are going to be roles where we can't do that, where you need technical ability, accountancy, doctor, all that jazz. But I have seen a huge change in how people are starting the recruitment conversation. Yeah,
and I know that this conversation is kind of leaning towards the whole recruiting piece, but that is a big piece of your onboarding. You know, I suppose the next step is to, when they walk through the door and you've both agreed that this is kind of the role that they'll be playing coming in, that's a next discussion. But just to close this one off, and people having gaps in their CV and flitting from one role to the other isn't necessarily them being restless and not wanting to commit to something and having a bad day and therefore I throw my toys out the cot. Let's have a discussion about that. I, in the past, have recruited 2 people where there have been 7 years gap in their CV, or they've flitted, and it was finding the right place, and we want to be the right place for you. What are some of the things that you're looking for in the culture of this business? Let's exchange ideas of what that would look like and how you would look. And let's, from the beginning, have continuous discussions to see how you settle in. That person ended up working for 4 years for me. So it's the way that you interact with someone around that whole onboarding process and having a true and honest discussion. And the person with a gap in their CV was so happy to come back after the break and excited. They outperformed my star player.
And that's not surprising, right? And I can share something from my personal career back in the corporate world. I got recruited into a position that I wasn't fully qualified for. I'm going back a really long time. And I reported into Paul, who was on our advisory board, you know. Yeah. And he always reminds me that he chose me over the more qualified people. And he tells me all the time, you were the least qualified for the role. I'm like, is that meant to boost my belief in myself? But he said time and time again, he would pick me because I was a perfect fit for his team. I brought the relevant knowledge, the information, and you can study after, you can get the relevant qualification, but actually what he needed was what I had, who I was as a person. And I worked with Paul for years, like genuinely years, because he knew he could plug and play me into whatever role or whatever he wanted me to do. And he chose me over a more qualified person. And I think it's being able to see past the ideals of what does this person need versus how can I adapt this individual to bring the best of them to the business and get the best out of them whilst they're here to help them with their career almost. Yeah.
Yeah. I've also got a bit of a, I feel the ideal candidate is a fallacy. Because what are you saying they're ideal? What is the benchmark for that? Marketing, chemical industry, pharmaceutical, you can create a benchmark best as. There is no ideal candidate.
Yeah, there isn't. So let's talk about, because I know we've talked about recruitment on it, but let's talk about the steps of the onboarding, because there's multiple, isn't there? So we've got the bit right at the front, which is the recruitment process, which in itself, there's certain points. Then where we're going.
It's the whole clearly communicating the roles and expectations for the individual. Integrated with the company culture and its processes, integrated into the how are we going to allocate your resource and how are we going to support you, as well as now the team. And I believe strongly in meeting one or two members of the team before you actually onboard someone, just so that they feel comfortable for seeing faces. I've had a in the business welcome a laptop and its cable being put on my desk and say, there you go, versus a whole 3-day process on this is what our culture is, this is what we're looking at, these are other people that you'll be working with, especially from a global perspective. Bring people together that are situated in various locations just so that they get to know each other, and they become a small little team that kind of carries on moving, so it's that whole day one, what are we doing?
And I think think about the impression that you're giving people, right? How would you be like to feel? How would you going to make them feel welcomed? Because it's not, it's almost like the emphasis is sometimes put on the new person to integrate themselves, whereas actually how are we welcoming? And like you, and I think we could go to every stretch of that extreme that you've said there. And what I experienced, which I think was a really positive one for me, was meeting leaders of the business. And it doesn't matter what position you come into, whether you are literally the person making the teas and coffees and booking meeting rooms to the person who's sitting on the board, you've got to have a conversation with a member of the board, a head of, a leader of, and that could be a 20-minute conversation. But I think that's so important because it also keeps the leaders involved in what's going on, who's coming into the business, and gives that cross conversation opportunity.
No, 100%. And it is the making your business real. Because if there's a meeting required for you to attend and there's a head of in that meeting, you're going to meet them. So why not make it a natural occurrence, whether someone's day 1 or day 30 or day 365 or whatever it is. Be who you are naturally, and we're not all high and mighty. Doesn't matter what your title is. Doesn't matter what
it's person, right?
And businesses are orientating towards that these days. And so the integration piece is, how am I integrating with other people? How am I able to navigate difficult situations a little bit? How am I integrating in the team as a reflector? And how are they acknowledging me as a reflector or someone that drives for results and potentially annoys people around me? Let's help taper that a little bit. It's all those things, and having true discussions around those things as a day-to-day occurrence during the onboarding period. Because I think probation, 3-month probation, is 3 months probation. It shouldn't be, if you truly believe in your recruiting process, there shouldn't really be a probation period in my mind. Although I think you're always on probation.
And I think it's going back to what we've said multiple times, is like on different things, is how you create a great experience, right? Because if you want to attract and retain top talent and great people are going to talk. Like, people want to be part of organizations that people want to feel taken care of. And I think if you want your reputation to be a really great employer, it starts at the very beginning, and it's at every single stage. And I think, and we're going to talk about a bit of the challenges and the gripes of why this should even matter in a minute, but I think even from that onboarding piece to what's the time frame and how are you planning from that initial day one to fully fledged in their role? Like, and that could be 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like, right, there's your
Yeah.
laptop, Tinie, off you go. I'll see you tomorrow about that KPI you need to. Like, it's
Yeah.
not that, is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. No, 100%. I also think you should be thinking of offboarding when you're onboarding,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
what that potentially looks like. And it's the whole concept around we want to retain this person. We want to make sure that we gain everything from them and retain that and enhance our business related to the information that they're bringing and the way that they're working with who we are and enhancing that for us. And so how do we retain all of that? Because people change their minds and want to move on or want to pursue something else or want to start their own business. And that's okay. And we need to be okay with the fact that there is going to be an offboarding somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think even saying and looking at a situation and going, actually, and being really open, like, what's your ambition? What's your vision?
Yes.
And I think people almost hide what that really is because they think it's going to put people off. Whereas actually, if you can go, right, realistically, this individual is going to be in this position for 2 years because they're really ambitious, they're going to move on. How can I, one, get the best out of them for 2 years? How can we get all their knowledge out of them to help us where we are now? And then be really realistic. Well, actually, they might go off and do something else in the business. Or if we support them in that, they might offer up that. Like, it's a two-way street almost, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're touching on offboarding. So the whole thing is, I mean, there are compliance and exit formalities that people have from an HR perspective that need to be adhered to. But for me, that's just almost a tick box exercise that needs to take place. And I know HR will want to but the point is that those are the compliance and exit formalities that a line manager should know about and actually apply, and it becomes a natural process to make HR's life easy. But the two other elements that are crucial for me from an offboarding point of view is the knowledge transfer and transition and planning. In other words, there is going to be a gap that this person is going to leave, and what does that look like and who can fill it? And then the other thing is preserving the relationships.
Yeah.
And that for me is a key piece. And any business that has got boomerangs, i.e. people that come back 2 years later or 3 years later, just is a great example of a business that has got a great culture where people leave for their own reason, but feel comfortable to come back.
And I think a great point on that knowledge transfer piece, coming from someone with a process mind and that background of compliance, is that should be happening all the time. Like, so for me, there shouldn't be a single point of failure. There shouldn't be a situation where you think, oh my God, if this person leaves the business, we have got a big gap, right? How are we constantly helping people spread that knowledge in the team, in the business all the time, not just at the point of exit? And also another point of that, retain the relationships. And don't know if I should say this out loud. There's nothing wrong with helping people exit from a really open adult conversation. And I've helped people in my team exit before because it's been the right thing for them, which ultimately means it's the right thing for the business. Because if you have somebody sitting there thinking, I want to step up into a manager position, I want to be a supervisor, and there's absolutely no opportunity for them that happening in the near to mid-term, they're just going to feel frustrated and disengaged. So actually, if it's the best thing for them, it's the best thing for the business, because you want someone that's truly committed to that position. And that's sometimes almost frowned upon, isn't it? Of like, how can we try and hang on to them? How can we try and retain them? And I've seen situations where people have been given, coaching to help retain them, or almost putting them on some kind of qualification course to retain them. But that amplifies the issue, because at the end of that coaching or the end of that qualification, there's nowhere for them to go. And then they just become incredibly frustrated, don't they?
Yeah. The biggest thing from where you go, what you were talking about there for me is, when people decide to leave your business, it's not a relationship breakup.
No.
And we sometimes think, oh, they don't like me anymore. and then react that way towards what's going on, instead of saying, dude, that's a great opportunity for you, irrespective if you're their team leader.
100%.
and saying, how can we help you
How can we help?
actually navigate that better for yourself and be successful in that space? They will freely do the knowledge transfer and the handover from a role perspective. They will definitely recommend you as a business to other people because of the way that you've treated them. And I see it so many times where people, once they've handed their resignation in, they just get ostracized. Or it's quietly done in the corner, and this is your last day, hand your laptop in. We don't want to see you anymore, but don't show your face in the reception area again. I mean, I've just seen so many of those scenarios.
And it's something that I've seen a lot, and this would have happened to me, but I'm this individual. I know it's like the minute someone exits the business, every single thing becomes their fault, and it's almost like a scapegoat, right? And it's like, it's almost like, do you not recognize by demonstrating this to the business and to the team, they're going to have no trust or faith in you as a leader, because they know the minute that they step out of this room, it's all going to be them that you're talking about. It's them that's going to be the scapegoat. And it's almost like they're the bad person for wanting to leave for their own, whatever reasons they've got. And it's just madness that people think that short-sightedly, of that actually, I would 100% never recommend anybody working for that individual of that company. And I will be very open about that with anybody that asks me, right? Like, you don't want people to talk like that about your organization, right? You want to say, it wasn't the right fit for me, but they were a brilliant place to work. Go and apply, you know?
Exactly. So the, sorry, my head went into a particular space there for a second. I feel that if you get to a stage where someone is underperforming, not meeting expectations, and you feel you need to exit them, go back and research the onboarding you did with this person and what you hired them for, and you'll see where I blame the business rather than the individual. I think the individual is partially to blame sometimes, because some people are just lazy and just don't want to do work. And then when you hold them to account to do that, it wasn't revealed in the interview process. So there are anomalies, but they are truly anomalies. If you have a truly thorough recruiting process, onboarding piece, and a line manager that is understanding and meeting the need of the individual, it becomes an anomaly when someone is underperforming and you've got to exit them out of the business.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about the kind of gripes, what we might be, for people out there that are managing teams or leading a business, like the kind of things we hear and see as a fallout of them not having a onboard and offboarding process that aligns with their business. So things that we might hear are, their gripes tend to be at the person, like they were great on the CV, but actually getting them in the role, they haven't performed. I need to exit them from the business. This disrupting my team, like all these stuff. Like, what else is there, Tienie, that you hear that if a leader that are listening, they might be able to resonate with?
Yes. So there's key things that stand out is the manager, i.e. the person that's recruited them, their imposter syndrome expands. They feel, oh my goodness, I don't want to be caught out. I'm going to blame everything on this individual. Instead of taking responsibility and saying, I didn't onboard them properly. I just gave them a laptop and a cable and said, crack on, mate. Take responsibility for the underperformance of your team. Have a conversation about that, on how you can do that better. So the imposter syndrome increases or gets accentuated by the manager. The second thing is, there might be an issue with your culture. Face it. We're a all-inclusive business, but we don't hire over 55s. From a cultural perspective, that flies in the face of what you're preaching. So there might be something wrong with your culture. And then the third thing is, you're not setting and managing expectations clearly.
And then that's just come up to a point around that on offboarding piece. Like, always ask for feedback, right? Like, always have a really, and yes, I know we have the HR protocol of the offboarding. That's not what I'm talking about, because we've all gone through them. We've all give feedback and absolutely nothing's happened. Whereas actually, what we want to listen to the feedback. Like, we want to have a proper conversation. We should be sitting down and discussing this feedback. How can we improve? Let's park our ego. Let's not start blaming the person that's no longer in the room. Like, how can we really align what we want, like you say, the culture, the values, to the organization and the people? Like, we need to be really intentional about how we do that. And unless we stop and listen to feedback, like if you are losing your top talent regularly to competitors, there's a problem, right? Like, what's the problem?
Yeah. Having a discussion with your competitor, saying, listen, we're not hiring in your space, so please don't hire in our space, is a candid conversation.
In reality, how often would that be abided by?
The mature businesses will do that.
Yeah.
Mature businesses will do that. Although there's nothing stopping you from doing it, but from an ethical perspective, you won't. And so it's those kind of things. And I think Google and Apple had that arrangement, ironically. The other piece that I also wanted to kind of just highlight here a little bit is if you're taking feedback from an offboarding perspective and doing nothing with it, stop doing it.
You're wasting your time.
It's a pointless activity. If you're definitely not going to look at that feedback, then take it out of the process. Don't put it in the process, because it's a pointless activity, and that's what's slowing a lot of businesses down. These pointless activities that they're so-called doing for getting feedback so we can get better, so that they can announce it to the world, but do nothing with it, slows them down.
And do something with it regardless of the level of person you're talking to, because what you tend to see is the feedback you're getting is about someone senior, someone who we know is a problem in the business, but we're just turning a blind eye. We can't, no one knows how to deal with that person. They're really difficult. They've been around forever, so we just let them crack on. Actually, it doesn't matter who you're getting feedback about, at what level. You should be acting exactly the same way. You should be having an open discussion. You should be looking for improvement. And
feedback takes courage, and we don't always want to talk to the person that's the problem child, especially when it's repeat play. But there needs to be a decision needs to be made, as to what is the next step, what's the true next step, and those aren't easy conversations to have.
No, absolutely not. But
no,
it's the difficult conversations that make the difference, though, right?
Yes. And it's being able to build to it. So it's, I'm worried about you. These are things that I'm hearing from other people, and people become defensive from an egotistical perspective, or they take it on board from an emotional intelligence perspective and try and do something about it. And thank you for trying, but it's still not working. Or, dude, you need to do something about it now. So it's having those conversations in a meaningful way. I feel critical thinking around that, being able to actually have those conversations. Those are things that
So for people listening, let's summarize, because I'm conscious we're coming to the top of our 30 minutes.
Wow.
I know. Like I said at the beginning, this is a huge topic. It's stuff that we spend loads of time potentially working on, different elements that we can support with. But people listening, what are the top 3 things that you would recommend them to either go and look at, to start to do around this? Where do you think?
Stop recruiting for skill, because that's a given on the CV. Start recruiting for behavior. Understand the integration between the person that you're recruiting and their manager, and how those behavioral profiles mix from a team dynamics perspective, and help them integrate as quickly as possible into your culture and what it is that's required in your business, so that they can feel comfortable in performing their best as quickly as possible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just sitting down and thinking of the process from end to end, from recruitment to offboarding, how can you create great experiences for your employees?
Yeah. And everybody's going to have a bad day.
Yeah.
But that should just be that's bad
okay.
day. That's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tienie. It's lovely to have you back, and what a great conversation. If anyone wants to explore their culture, their onboarding, offboarding, please get in touch. Happy to have the conversation, and we'll be back next week.